Hey, this is Garrett Gibbons with Adrerin Productions. I want to show you a few tips in Lightroom concerning how to use this HSL color and black and white palette. Now, these are some advanced tools that are fairly simple to use, but a lot of people don't bother to touch. Often they're not necessary, but if you're trying to fine-tune an image and get just the right result, you'll find that this is an excellent place to tweak color. So let's start with a practical example. This is a wedding photograph I took that was overexposed on a very, very, very bright day in San Diego. There are a few problems with it. One is the exposure is too high. My main problem, though, is that this grass looks very orange and the sky is rather flat and washed out. So I want to bring it to something that looks like this, and I'll show you how to get there. So the first thing I'm going to do is, you may think, well, let's just bring the exposure down, but quickly we discover, thankfully this is a raw image, but we still have a lot of clipping in her dress. It's completely overexposed, probably another 2 stops would be needed. Her dress was a big giant reflector, and even if we bring it down 4 stops, there's no way that we're going to get that. So I'm just going to bring that back to the middle, and we're going to go to the tone curve. And I'm going to tweak and finesse a little bit until I get something that I'm beginning to like. Now I don't want to mess with things too much. Now let's go to the temperature. You see that this was shot at 7050 Kelvin. It's a little bit warm, and that's part of what's making the grass look so orange. And so I'm lowering it down a little bit towards the maybe 6000-ish. I'll just type in 6000. Now you'll see that the tones in their face are a little more natural, but the grass is still kind of bleh. We could really lower the color temperature, and then we get this sort of, well, it just looks like it's incorrectly white balanced sort of look. So I'm going to favor on the side of getting their faces roughly where I want them to be. Now, the next step, this is sort of the cheap and easy way to do it, but I'm going to show you the easy way is to crank up the vibrance. In Lightroom, the Vibrance channel primarily affects, it's similar to saturation. If we crank saturation up, this is what happens, but you'll notice that their skin tones get really orange. That will still happen in Vibrance as we turn it up, but not nearly as much. It primarily affects the areas of color that are not in human skin tones. So we see that the blues and pinks and greens and those are being affected. Now, this is way too much in my opinion, and probably my final image, let me click on it here, is too vibrant and too saturated for some people's taste, which is why in a minute I'm going to show you how to do color mixing in black and white. And of course there are ways to make muted Holga types of looks, and that's a wonderful look, but it's just not what I'm going for with this photo right now. But let's turn up the vibrance to about 40 here. I'm going to turn up the clarity a tiny bit to do some local contrast. I'm going to leave everything else there. I'm going to leave the tone curve for the moment, and let's spend the rest of the time in our HSL color black and white area. Now our hue, saturation, and luminance, in other programs, take note, it's hue, saturation, and lightness, but in Lightroom, it's luminance. This is where we're going to adjust our colors to get them just where we want. Now the grass is this sort of orangish green, and what this first panel of hue, these are sliders that allow us to adjust the colors. So our green grass tones are roughly in the green or aqua range here. And you see that if we move this slider to the left, the grass looks like it's dead and hasn't been watered. And as we move it to the right, it begins to look really, really blue. Now, obviously this is too blue, but I'm going to bring it a little bit more towards the blue so it looks a little more healthy. Now there's a little bit of the aqua that I want to move towards the blue, just a little bit. The next thing is that the sky here is a little bit flat. I want it to be more of a deep blue and less of a teal color, but as you see, moving this slider does not have the desired effect. I mean, this you know, may have worked for a Grateful Dead poster, but it's not working. So I'm going to leave that right in the center, and we're going to go to our saturation. I'm going to saturate the blues and the aquas a bit, and saturate the greens a little bit. But now we go to the luminance. Now, luminance has a very interesting effect in relation to color vibrance and intensity. Basically, as I lower the luminance of some of these channels, the colors become more saturated and vibrant. So by lowering the luminance on the green, we get more of a punchy sort of green. And by lowering the luminance on the blue, we get more of a punchy blue. Now you can watch up here in the histogram in the upper right-hand corner how that blue moves along with these luminance values, as well as some of the other colors. And so be careful not to throw it out of range of where you're trying to go. Now, a few final things that I want to do just for taste is I am going to give a little bit of recovery on this. I've done a little bit of that through the tone curve. You can get a similar effect to recovery by tweaking these and bringing down the highlights. But since I know that it's blown out, I'm just going to leave it. Also, I'm going to do a tiny bit, not lens correction, but effects. I'm going to do a tiny bit of a vignette just to draw the eye a little bit more towards the couple. Some people are really into this sort of look, and back in the 80s they did this sort of look, but I'm just going to do a little bit to draw the eye in. And as you'll notice that the exposure being lowered on the corners actually continues to make those colors more vibrant. Now, black and white version. Let me make a virtual copy of this first one. Now, there is an easy way to do black and white, and there is the correct way to do black and white. The easy way is to take saturation and bring it all the way down. Now it looks great and all, but there are ways to have more control. So I'm going to undo that. And we're going to go into, in the basic tab here, we're going to go to black and white. This is now a separate mode from color mode. We still have the same controls in terms of a lot of these things, and I can do some things like, bring up the black point, crush the blacks a little bit more. Maybe we want more clarity because now that we're dealing in tones, it's sort of a different look. Whatever you want to do. But in this black and white section of the HSL color and black and white pane, we can see what's called the black and white mix. Now I had it set to automatically mix the colors. What it does is, based on each channel, it determines automatically where it thinks your saturation levels and luminance levels should be as it creates the black and white. This is a channel mixing sort of effect. It's a little bit more advanced, and it's very easy to tweak in Lightroom. So this is a beautiful thing. Now I don't mind the way that it's done it too much. You can see that if we bring down green a lot, then it becomes like really grainy and gritty, which could be kind of cool for some types of things. If we bring it up, it becomes really washed out and kind of blah. I do want it lower than the middle, but I don't want it too far. Also, you can see that we can adjust the sky well. If I bring it up very light here, this looks awful. Well, maybe it doesn't look awful, but it just creates more of a bland image and takes the focus away from the couple. But as I lower the blue mix, we get more of sort of a 50 or 60% gray tone through the sky, which is more neutral and draws the focus both to the building they were married in and to the couple. Now maybe I want to undo a little bit of the green because the grass might be a little bit too much. Now some fun things include the flowers behind. We can make them look all white or make half of them turn gray. You can see that it's affecting her bouquet as well as I go back and forth, because there's a lot within this magenta range. I don't want it to look too similar to the grass, so I'm actually going to lighten up the flowers just in this instance. Now the purple, you'll see, doesn't affect as much, but it tends to affect sort of the shadow regions and those that are slightly color tinted from the magenta, but most of those flowers are in the magenta. Going into the yellow, we see a lot of the stuff, the yellow and the orange affects a lot of the skin tones. Maybe we want to lighten up the orange channel a little bit. We've got some unfortunate shadows on their faces. He's casting a shadow, and she's got her dresses, like they're little rhinestones that are reflecting onto his face. Oh well, it's not perfect. It's not studio photography, but we can go into spot removal and things like that. In fact, I'll just show you that really fast. So I go into heal and come down. I'm scrolling on the mouse wheel to make this the right size, and I find that it has the best result if I make the circle just barely bigger than the spot. And I can zoom in further if I go 2 to 1. It's as far as Lightroom lets me go, as far as I know. And that doesn't work, so I'm going to drag that over. And then there are more spots on her face. You get the idea. One could spend a lot of time doing that. At least that's a general improvement. Now another little detail is this guy enjoying his day while they were having their photos taken. So you can see that between the version that we worked on and the final version, I removed him. I will show you how. In Photoshop, you could use the clone stamp tool, and you could paint and do all sorts of other things. If you're trying to get through a lot of volume quickly, I recommend trying it in Lightroom. Now, I would recommend doing this in several stages. First, let's remove his head, and we can drag around the source area to find something that we like. Remove his body, one click at a time. We hope that we don't all suffer a similar fate to this man, having our bodies removed by a dispassionate photo editor. And I'm going to add some more flowers in to kind of bring that and cover it up. Let me just keep going until it's done. It may not be exactly the same as the other one, and I'm going to go a little bit fast just for the purpose of demonstration, but you'll get the idea of the general. Now you see that in the middle here, you can still see a little bit of his shirt and this little trace of something down there by the flowers. But if I try to click on any of these, it highlights what I've already done. So there are probably a million ways to do this, but one way I do it is I first set what I want to be there, and then I grab it and move it in. And I can also do that here, and let's do that. So obviously, for a paying client, which this client was, and really for any work, you want to spend as much time as possible and make it look perfect. This is a little bit quicker than I would ever do it for a customer, but that's the general approach. Now, like I said, in Photoshop, that's where you can really fine-tune, and you can adjust the brush size, and you can have different sizes of things and whatnot. But the nice thing about Lightroom is that all this is undoable. I can go back to the clone area, and I can tweak any of these after the fact, and it makes it beautiful. And in fact, another nice thing about this is if there were several photos, say, on a tripod, and the same guy was in the same position in all of them, I can just sync those photos together and have the clone stamp tool effects applied to each of them, and so he's just removed from all of them at once, and it's much faster than a batch Photoshop sort of operation. And we retain all of our 14-bit raw image data here. The last thing that I did to this black and white photo that is kind of a cheesy thing, but whatever, is I did this severe vignette, but then I took the roundness down to make it very square, and then brought the midpoint in slightly, and you get these rounded corners, which is kind of vintagey, as well as a nice bleed in the corner, which sort of takes me back to my 35mm film days, and it even kind of looks like 8mm film does now still when you look at it. You can do less or more of this to taste. You could do something more extreme like that. Kind of looks like an Instagram photo on your iPhone. Or you can just barely have it an element, just sort of suggest at it. And of course you can tone down the effect by, we can bring it in like that, but then just decrease the amount of the effect, and then you see more of it on the edges, more of the original image down there. I find that that's less realistic in terms of a film type of look, just because usually when it's clipped and gone, as though this were the edge of the frame, it's gone. If you're enlarged or had that shape or whatever it is, that's usually how the fall off would look a little bit. Again, it's fake and it's cheesy, so maybe you don't want to do that at all. But it's just a technique that's kind of fun. Hope you learned something. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you would have done differently. Thanks, guys.